It is time for my July wrap up. So let's get right into it. This month was kind of ridiculous. I had no idea that I was going to read 15 books this month. It's another one of those times where I barely get anything finished for a week and a half, and then out of nowhere, it's just one book after the other. So we're just going to start with the first thing I finished this month and work all the way to the last thing, as usual. I mean, that's the smart way to do it. And some of these I'm not going to talk about too much because I'm going to make a separate video for them. And one of them is Angry Lead Skies by Glenn Cook. It's the first book I finished this month, and it's the 10th book in the Garrett P.I. series, and it was amazing. It's one of the best ones in the series. Couldn't believe it. You don't expect book 10 in a noir fantasy series to be just as good as like the first handful that made you fall in love with the series. I'll expand on that a little later in a separate video because I read a lot of Glenn Cook this month, as you will see. I have been wanting to read Guy Gavriel Kay for a long time, and I finally did. I read A Song for a Bond, and it was awesome. It was so good. It was exactly what I expected based on things everyone else has said about Guy Gavriel Kay. So I don't know what else to add to that. I made a review for it, so you should definitely go check that out. It's just great. He writes in a style that was heavily influenced by the romantic fantasy writers of the early 20th century. I don't mean romantasy. I mean things like Lord Dunsany and the people Poul Anderson was influenced by, stuff like that. Next on the list, we have, holy crap, another banger, Pop 1280. Made a review about that the day I finished it. I was listening to it on my way home from work, finished it, came home, filmed a video. Pop 1280 by Jim Thompson is so good. I mean, it is a 5-star read. Like I said, I've got a review about it. If you want a quick rundown of it, this is a story of a sheriff around 1917 in the smallest county in Texas, not like geographically small, but population small. Like the county population is 1,280 people. And he's just this like bumbling idiot that everyone kind of takes advantage of. Or is he? It's just amazing. I mean, you see this dark path this guy is going down, and he's gaslighting everyone around him. He's gaslighting you, the reader. It's just amazing. Definitely check out the review or just go get the book. You'll like it. Pop 1280 was amazing. And then I read Lonesome Dove, another amazing book that takes place in Texas. And Lonesome Dove, what am I supposed to say? Probably one of the best books I've ever read in my life. It is now my new favorite Western of all time. It's pushed aside Blood Meridian, and it's actually made me second guess how much I like Blood Meridian. I mean, Lonesome Dove is just incredible. It is quite the tome. So it's kind of hard to get into it. I mean, once you start reading it, you get into it very quickly, but just holding that big old chunker of a book, you're like, man, this is a lot. That's why it took me 6 or 7 months to finally get around to reading it. And that was when I decided to actually read it. I've owned a copy for a couple years now. And just recently I was like, well, let's finally do this. And man, it was worth it. Lonesome Dove is fantastic. So I started Wild Cards for Aces Abroad a few months ago on audio, and I was listening to it and I'm like, man, this is pretty good. It's not as good as the first 3, but it was doing something. And then I got to this one and I'm like, oh my God, this narrator is awful. It's like a cast of narrators now because it is a collection of short stories that are put together to create like a narrative that follows through the entire book. And what they decided to do was for each character, they got a different narrator. And that's fine, except that one of the narrators was awful. She was trying to do this like Louisiana or Mississippi accent, and it was so bad. It was like someone had taken a blow to the head and then was forced to immediately start trying to talk like Scarlett O'Hara or something. It was awful. And I was like, man, this sucks. So I gave up on it. And then I finally got back to the book and I was just going to read it with my eyeballs. Well, I start reading that story and I finish that story and I'm like, oh, the narrator did suck. But this story also sucked. It was pretty hit or miss in this book, but when it hit, man, did it hit. It's all the just graphic, hyper violent, super grim, and just over the top superhero stuff that you expect out of Wild Cards. And I really enjoyed it, but man, the stinkers were real stinkers. And there's like 3 of them in there. And there's like this whole little subplot through it that has to do with like religious fanaticism. It is terrible. I did not like it at all. But yet again, George R. R. Martin's stuff is amazing. He wrote the interludes all the way through the story, and they are just great. And then by the end of the book, I'm bawling my eyes out. It was very good. It was worth reading, but it wasn't as good as any of the books in the first 3. On a whim, I decided, hey, you know what's cool? Kevin Costner. You know what's even cooler? Books that were turned into movies that had Kevin Costner in them. So I decided to read, you guessed it, The Postman. You thought I was going to say Dances with Wolves. And man, The Postman, the book, and The Postman, the movie have almost nothing in common. The only thing they share is that at the beginning, a dude in a post-apocalyptic setting finds a mail truck and mailman clothes and pretends to be a mailman. Everything else is different. And the book is very, very good. I was pretty blown away by it. It had some flaws that kind of kept it away from being like perfect, but man, it's very, very good. And it goes in places you would not expect after seeing like the movie. It has like these very fantastic moments where these people come together, and you know, they kind of have that in like the movie. And I know I keep comparing to the movie and saying they're nothing alike, which I should probably stop, but it's just really cool. It's really well written. It's got all the things I want in like a post-apocalyptic setting. So you've got, you know, post-apocalyptic America. You've got roaming bands of like raiders and stuff. You've got worries about radiation. And then you've got some things I won't talk about here. But there's a little bit of future tech that I did not expect in this book. And man, it was just great. Loved it. Then I moved on to The Martian Chronicles by Ray Bradbury. And I tried with this book. I don't know what it is, but you've got amazing writing that just blows you away, followed by exposition vomit that makes you wish you didn't know how to read. I don't get it. I mean, it's like 5-star, 1-star, 5-star, 1-star, because the book is a fix-up. So it's a bunch of his short stories that he turned into a novel. And some of them like blew my mind. They're just so good. And then other ones are like, I really don't want to read this. I don't know why I'm still in this. And it was because the other ones are so good. And I was hoping to get another one like that. And so it's just a very mid book. Just averages out that way. I'm going to give Ray Bradbury one more chance because Bridger from the Library Ladder told me to, and I believe him, but he only gets one more chance because I'm not the biggest fan of Fahrenheit 451, and then The Martian Chronicles was pretty much a stinker. I finally did it. I read Frankenstein. I read the 1818 text, so I read the correct one. It's good. It's Frankenstein. I mean, it's insane that an 18-year-old woman wrote that. I'm not saying that 18-year-old women can't do things. I'm just saying that when I was 18, I was borderline incompetent, so I'm just always shocked when someone around that age does anything this amazing with their intellectual abilities. And yeah, it's good. I don't know what else to say. These next few I'm going to go over pretty quickly because I'm going to talk about them in a separate video, and I'm just going to tell you they're really good. So I read the Starfish Trilogy by Glenn Cook. Holy crap, Glenn Cook can write some science fiction. This was the first science fiction I've read from him. Dark War doesn't count because it's science fantasy, and it's just like, okay. But yeah, like hard science fiction, man, Glenn Cook can write it. It's just so good. And it's so different than The Black Company, which makes sense. One's science fiction, one's fantasy. But check this out. While working a full-time job in 1982, Glenn Cook wrote like 5 novels, 3 of which were the Starfishers Trilogy. He wrote the trilogy, and it was all published in 1982. So it was just bam, bam, bam. It's amazing. Like, how do you do that? How do you have like a young family, full-time job, and then be like, you know what? I'm going to write a science fiction trilogy that's going to blow you away. And it blew me away. It's so good. The same cannot be said about Sung in Blood, his fantasy standalone that was published by NESFA Press. It's like okay, almost okay. It's like borderline bad. I think it only ever saw a copy editor, which is a big problem, but I'll elaborate on that in my Glenn Cook video that I'm going to be releasing shortly after this one. So I read I Am Legend by Richard Matheson, and it's like fine. It's so melodramatic. Like, it's ridiculous how melodramatic it is. It's like, bro, Neville, you are a drama llama. Like, I understand that you're like, woe is me, I am the last man alive, I've lost everything, which I could sympathize with. So the things that man lost would be the things that would destroy me if I lost them. But it's just the way he whines and cries about it and then obsesses over really weird things. The book is just strange. I mean, I'm glad I read it. I really like his concept for vampires, which kind of work a lot more like zombies. Like, it's like a cross between the traditional vampire and like the way we see zombies today, which makes sense because George Romero said that the I Am Legend vampires were an influence for him when it came to creating zombies. But yeah, it's fine. I think that the most interesting thing is seeing California in the 1950s. It's like, all right, man, it's like this would not go down like this now. After that, I read One More Bridge to Cross, Lowering the Cost of War by H. John Poole. So H. John Poole is known for The Last 100 Yards, which is a book that civilians can't buy anymore, which is strange. I mean, I have a copy and it's like astronomical on eBay, but I bought mine another way. He writes about strategies for small infantry units. So it is basically the tactics that a sergeant and a squad would use to fight in war. One More Bridge to Cross is like a prequel to The Last 100 Yards. It's basically his arguments for why we should have better combat tactics for small units. He talks about the value of life, which, the value of life is important. This was written in 1999, so this is like pre 9/11, and he's talking about all these different tactics that are now used in the military, but at the time they weren't. And he was critiquing like the Gulf War and the Vietnam War, and he was a Vietnam vet, and he's written a ton of stuff about tactics like this. But the problem with his writing is some of it is just like heavily biased in really weird ways. He just like throws stuff out there like, of course, this is just a well-known fact. And it's like, no, it actually isn't. It's just weird because the rest of the time, he's got notes for everything. He cites every single thing he does. Yeah, and it's just so strange. Like, a lot of it is this weird, like, right-wing conspiracy crap. I don't even know about right wing. I think it's like weird neoliberal stuff from like the late 90s. And I don't understand this dichotomy between really knowing what he's talking about when it comes to military strategy, especially in small unit tactics. And then he just like goes off the rails with this weird political stuff. And it's like, all right, man, if you cut this from here, it'd be a lot cooler. And I think one of the problems with One More Bridge to Cross is it was like essentially an essay that got stretched out just enough to be a book. It's like 115 pages. It needed to be shorter. There's a lot of fluff in there, and he repeats the same anecdotes again and again. And I know it's not that he's missing more anecdotes, because he has other works that cover the same thing and have a lot more varied coverage. So I don't know what it is. It's really strange. And then the last book I read of the month, Passage at Arms by Glenn Cook. Holy crap. It's probably the best thing I've read by Glenn Cook. I would put it up against any two Black Company novels. This man can write science fiction, and it's absolutely soul crushing that I only have one more science fiction book from him from 1987, which means the man has not published anything for science fiction in 37 years. It's a joke. He has some short fiction and like the Best of Glenn Cook and stuff, which I'm going to go back and read now because it all takes place in the same setting, which is like his future history setting. But man, I'm kind of crushed that I only have one more to go. I got to tell you something. I think he probably should have been a science fiction writer. I love The Black Company, my favorite fantasy series of all time. But if someone told me that I could have 10 science fiction novels from Glenn Cook instead that are at the same quality as Passage at Arms, I might do it. This has been one heck of a month. I mean, holy crap. And for August, I mean, it's Garb August. So nice booktube event where you just read junk, and I've got plenty of junk to read. I'm probably going to try some Robotech novels. I've got this badass thing over here. Let me find it. Found it. Took me a minute. The Survivalist by Jerry Ahern. And this is about some former CIA operative guy who knew the world was going to end, so he prepared. And now he's got to try to rescue his estranged wife and children. And it's like, maybe had you not been focusing on preparing for the end of the world, your marriage wouldn't have ended. I mean, I'm just going out on a limb here. I'll read it and see how it goes. It's like 130 something pages. Oh no, it's like 200 pages. I'll give it a try for Garb August. Probably going to be awful. I have a feeling I'm going to DNF like 10 books in August because I'm going to read junk. And if it sucks, I'm going to DNF it. I think I'll make a video about Garb August because it's going to be just fun. Other than that, August is going to be a lot of reading whatever I want. That's how July was, and look how that turned out. It was great. I learned a lot about my tastes in books, and I just want to thank you all for watching this. Let me know how your July went. I'd love to hear what you read over the month and what you plan on reading in August. Thanks for watching, and with that, I'll see you next time.